Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's your host, Malik Washington, back with another episode of Breaking Mental Barriers. How you all doing this fine day or evening, wherever you all reside? I apologize. I was doing episode 18, and apparently my audio was tapping in and out for whatever the reason. I believe it's because my AirPods was connected to my laptop. And so, although I didn't have my AirPods in my ears, the audio was connected to it. And so it was trying to pick up on my voice as I was speaking. I had assumed I disconnected it. Turns out I didn't. And therefore it kind of messed the episode up because it was trying to pick up on my voice, and it was in and out from what I was hearing, but it was it was somewhat scratchy and then kind of distant, almost like I was kind of like back there and not necessarily right here in front of you guys. So I apologize about that. That was some oversight on my part, but no big deal. I'm just gonna kind of just go over pretty much everything I relatively talked about within that episode so that you guys can kind of get a summary of exactly what I was talking about. And that's what this episode is actually going to be about. So it's not another episode per se. I guess you could say it's like the final version of that episode that wasn't heard or wasn't discussed properly without there being some agitation in the situation or hindrance. So without further ado, I'm going to just go ahead and dive right in. The episode was titled Understanding. What was the passage? It was Psalms 82 verse 6. Oh, I have said that you are gods, but you would die like men as of the princes. So I'm going to start with the monologue first, actually, because within the monologue, I was discussing how I notice a lot of times within social media and even within my real life, especially when I was growing up, one of the things that often prevents truth tellers, truth speakers, or anyone who's outspoken, more candid in their speech, and they're not necessarily one to kind of like cut corners or walk on eggshells, if you will, with their words. They just kind of just come out and right on out and say how they really feel. Right? Of course, every thought shouldn't be uttered. We should always ponder the things that we say, naturally so. Some people, they can speak the truth, ponder what they say before they say it, of course. But then there are people who, they're just kind of fools when they say things. They just say it just to say it. And a lot of times it's not backed up, it's not substantive, or it's not the right moment or the right time to actually speak it. I believe that there's a season for every moment, or there's a time for every instance that occurs. There's a time to be happy, as the scriptures would often say, time to be sad, time to be happy, time to be angry, time to be loving, all those different things. Because the human experience is an amalgamation of all those things. It's not just this one-sided history of positivity, and then there's no negative on the other end. There's a balance between the two. And so for me, as a truth speaker, a truth teller, whatever the case, whatever label, whatever label you want to put on it, sometimes we come across individuals who you can speak the truth to them, but they focus a lot more on your tone and your delivery as opposed to what you're actually saying, right? And by that meaning, you might have often heard it even in your own life. Well, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. But I often propose the counter. If I spoke to you with positive affirmations, like your typical pastor or your typical motivational speaker, I could yell and scream to the top of my lungs how great you all are, how amazing and awesome humanity is, how you all are going to go forth and you're going to be the best thing in the world. I can speak to you exactly in the way of which a fire and brimstone preacher might do the same to you. But you would never say to me in that same instance when I'm speaking wonderful things to you, or in this case, as they would say back in the ancient times, itching your ears. You would never say to me, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. In fact, you wouldn't say anything about it at all. You wouldn't have a problem with my delivery and tone. And you know why? because I'm saying something that you actually favor. I'm saying something that you actually like, right? I wouldn't get the same reaction if I were to say that if I were to say that this race of women were the most beautiful women on earth. That same race is not going to get upset at me about my tone and delivery, because I'm saying things in spite of the fact that not everyone in that group might actually be beautiful. No one's going to come out and try to counter my point and saying that that's not true. All of these women within that race aren't beautiful. In fact, they're just going to be like, "Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. That's so sweet. I like the fact that you said that. I appreciate that." But if I say the truth of the matter, and I say that no, not all of you are beautiful. Some of you are not so appealing. Some of you are ugly. Some of you I don't find favorable. Then here comes all of the counters. Well, who are you to judge? And nobody cares what you think. And this and that. And why do you even have to say that? That's none of your concern, right? Or the big one. Like, though what you say might be true, how you say it is coming across as being anti, or you're bashing, or you're doing this and you're doing that. And so within my monologue, what I'm discussing is these people don't seem to have a grasp that they don't have to listen to what I or any of these truth tellers say that they don't agree with. You don't have to agree with it. But what I respect more outside of that is that if you don't like what I'm saying, then counter what I'm saying and tell me how I'm wrong. Don't get so caught up in how I'm saying it, because how I'm saying it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's what I'm saying. Because if you don't like what I'm saying, but then the next person I talk to in the same tone can take it and say, "Oh no, I hear what you're saying. I may or may not agree to it." And that's what I'm hearing more. The substance. Some people focus entirely too much on the delivery or the tone of what others say. And it has its place. I'm not saying that it doesn't. You take, for an example, if you're talking to a judge, if you're talking to police, if you're talking to your parents, if you're talking to anyone who is of authority, sometimes you have to be very situational, have impulse control, and know how to speak to people, because when you get in there and it pertains to your life, you have to be mindful of the things that you say before any and everybody. Sometimes even to local people, because some people are batshit insane. Let's just be honest. And that's the truth of the matter. I live my life in a situational context. I don't go around soliciting everything that I believe to everybody. The only time my true beliefs come out, and that's the only time they come out, is if you ask me. If you ask me my beliefs, if you ask me what I stand for, if you ask me what matters to me, then I'll come out and I'll say what I truthfully feel. Otherwise, I go about my business, I live my life, I try to figure shit out like the typical adult. I'm not bothering anybody. Because honestly, I don't want no trouble with any human. But if any human wants trouble with me, they can have it, but I'm not going to stand for it. They can have it, but I can live without it. And honestly, I'm not looking to be in controversy with anyone. But the one thing I'm not going to do is shut down how I feel, because your feelings might have gotten hurt in the process. Now, if you want to be adults, have the conversation. We can have that conversation. But I'm not going to sell away or sell myself short of my belief because you don't like what I'm saying. Because the one thing I believe in is free will. You don't have to listen to me. I don't care for people agreeing with me for the sake of agreement. I don't care for people disagreeing. I like having a conversation. Does it get passionate sometimes? Yes, because some things matter to me more so than others. And I think for some of you, there are some topics that you have that matter to you, that you're passionate about. So you're going to have those conversations, and they're going to get, at a lot of times, tough. And sometimes you're going to be asked questions you may not know the full-blown answer to, and it's okay. Sometimes it messes with your ego because you don't quite know the answer. But it's okay to just say, "I don't know." Now, some people are quite smug when you don't know the answer, and I don't know what that comes from. I don't know if it makes their dicks hard, if it makes the pussies wet. I don't know. But one thing I do know, humans like to, for some reason, feel like they're diametrically better than you are in some instances. And like I say, don't know what that stems from. Maybe that's in part due to our evolution. You know, we've went from fighting and now we're doing all this intellectual sparring, and maybe perhaps sometimes because we've traded intellectualism for, we traded brawn for intellectualism. Sometimes that amygdala comes up when people are smart or smarter than us, and we might feel sometimes a bit threatened because we may not know how to combat the situation, given that we may not know as much as that person does. But what I often learn is, as a person who loves to read, who loves to analyze things, who likes to look at systems for what they are, sometimes the best thing to do is just to be quiet, listen, hear what the person is saying, ask questions if you simply don't know. And it's okay to be wrong if you are wrong about something. Be willing to be open with yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously because you don't know everything. And not everyone likes a know-it-all. And that's okay. Because I know that there's a lot of things I don't know. And even for the so-called smug people who may know more than me, I actually do learn from them. Some things of what to do versus what some things not to do. So you don't always have to be in the know of everything, but what you do have to be is mindful and open to conversation with people who might think relatively different than you, and that's okay. I grew up in a household with my great grandparents who raised me. Very direct. Let your yay be yay or your nay be nay, but that was more biblically binding than anything, not necessarily them, but I was raised under it. And so because I believe in just being direct and taking constructive feedback for what it is, constructive, sometimes it's controversial, but nonetheless constructive, you take it on the chin, you own what it is that you have done, and it makes things easier. Sure, there's penalties and there's consequences, but that's part of life. And I assumed that adults who I speak to know how to, in some way, shape, or form, to do the same thing. That if there's something that you've done wrong or you said wrong, you kind of know how to take it because, well, you have parents or you have guardians. And those people had to do to you what now the world, who I'm not your relative, but I might be someone that cares enough in the world to tell you where you're going off or where you're going wrong as someone that's close to me. And if you can't handle it because somehow, some way, there's like this impulsivity in your mind where you feel like everything that's told to you is in a negative facet, it's not going to work out in conversation. And so sometimes it reverts to, let me find ways to shut the conversation down so I don't have to hear the other side's opinion. Or I don't have to hear the feedback that's being given to me as an individual. So what I'm saying is, in this entire monologue, is this. What I would like for men and women to do, if you believe in what you're saying, believe in it and stand on it. If you feel like you're wrong about something, be willing to pivot. If the information is counter to what you believe, acknowledge it and be open to the fact that you could be wrong. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Doesn't take away from your foundation. Doesn't take away from who you are as an individual or your moral compass. All it simply is stating is that what you said in this particular data point isn't entirely accurate. Or if there's something, or if there's a conversation you're having with someone and that person is not willing to be reasonable, and all they ever continue to do because you might sound passionate or you sound like you actually believe in what you're talking about, and that person just wants to constantly utter how your tone and delivery is off, stop having a conversation with them. Because you can't change your demeanor or who you are if your purpose is to tell the truth. In certain instances in life, all tone is not going to be met with the same force. In so many words, if you're driving towards a cliff, I'm not going to speak to you like Mr. Rogers if we're about to go towards a cliff and there's the potential that we could die if we go over that cliff. I'm going to yell and tell you to fucking either stop this damn car, turn a different direction. There's a cliff over there. Get the hell away from it. Period. You may not like how I said it, but we're being serious now because this is a serious situation. If I'm having a conversation with you about something that I might deem truthful, I'm going to come across as a sincere person because I'm definitely not trying to be fake. I'm definitely not trying to be phony. I'm certain this is certainly not a script. This is from the heart. I think you could appreciate it more instead of me just reading a piece of paper to you all, hear ye, hear ye. To all my fellow Americans. The fuck? Why do I have to talk to you that way? No. You're right here in front of my face. Let's have a conversation. That's it. That's all. You don't have to worry about my tone. I'm not here to attack you. I'm not here to act as if I'm better than you. And I know most people will take it that way. When people are either wise or they're philosophical or they're trying to speak the truth or they're teaching from the Bible or whatever their beliefs are, people thinking that they're holier than thou. And that's not necessarily what that is, right? I've always said, for me, the goal is to teach alignment. If you are within this faith, I want to teach you what the scriptures is actually entailing, what it wants its audience to know from the perspective of how they conveyed it back then and how it will go forth to audiences of today, and what you can do going forth with that information if you so choose. You're not here to adhere to all things of what Malik says, because I know at the end of the day, you're human, I'm human, you're going to do whatever you want regardless of what I say. Period. I don't care. Because at the end of the day, I'm not your controller. I'm not your parents. I'm not your slave master. I'm not your God. I'm none of those things. I'm Malik. I have a perspective. I'm here to give that perspective. I'm here for it to be challenged. I'm here for you to adhere to it if you've had the same thoughts that I've had. Or maybe there's some questions unanswered and you need the questions answered, and maybe this podcast does it for you. I'm not sure. But whatever the case may be, I speak through you because there are people out here who perhaps may want to know things that you may not care to know, or it's not of interest to you. But I welcome any and all people who want to talk to me in a respectable and scholastic manner. Right? And I'm open to being wrong if I am wrong. But I'm also not going to just let you think that you're right about everything. If I think that you're wrong about something, I'm going to challenge you. And challenging you does not mean that my tone is off because I'm trying to speak something to you that I think matters to me. I always believe in making people believe what I want them to believe. Even though a perfect example, even with my father, he hadn't been in my life and he just came into my life around 2019. But the one thing that stood out that he said to me was, make me believe what you believe. If you're going to tell me these things, articulate it to me. What is it about what you're saying that will benefit or help me in the long run that it currently helps you right now? And that couldn't be any truer statement. Because in all things, we have to be honest with ourselves. And the truth of the matter is that we have to take control of our lives. And if we want to help others do the same, we have to be willing to stand on it, even if people don't like what we say. It's hard. And I understand there are people out there who have, let's say, their business ventures, their sponsors, they work jobs. So there's a lot of things that can't be said. And I'm more so of a guy that's a freebie. Job or not, I'm going to speak the truth. Of course, there's a time and a place. And I ponder and I'm very calculated. I make sure that if I'm going to say this, I'm standing on that. That's what I try to encourage in others. And I know everyone isn't like that. But I exhort it because I believe in it myself and I am that kind of guy. I would hope that maybe there's somebody like that that's in you or in anyone else that's listening to this video. And if not, that's okay. It is what it is. You're not me and I'm not you. Doesn't make me greater or better or anything like that. Far from it. So, that being said, there was that monologue. Now, the second portion, which is the actual title of it in and of itself, this episode, about that scripture. It's a relatively short passage. It's a psalm. But it was also written within the law and the prophets, the scriptures in general. And so what we have in the book of Psalms 82 verse 6 is a passage that talks about, I have said that you are gods, but you will die like mortals or men, as the princes. Now, This passage in particular is about delegated rulership, delegated authority that Yahweh had bestowed upon certain people of the earth, right? Whether if you were a representative of the Creator himself, you were a pharaoh, if you were a king, you could say an ambassador, whatever the case may be, you play the role of an Elohim. You play the role of a God. And the fact of the matter is that comes with great power. As our guy Uncle Ben used to say, great power and great responsibility. It's important that in this scenario of playing Elohim, you are given a divine rule to make sure to lead his people, lead his sheep, lead his flock. Or in your case, if you're a Gentile, you lead your nation and you fight for what's right. You implement systems of justice. You have the conversation of what's right and wrong, all of those different things. Irrespective of your positioning, though, whoever you are, and if you have that kind of authority, the goal in mind is to make sure that you enact the ways of a God, but also acknowledge that within that power, you still are under an authority. And that authority is Yahweh himself. Now, in the book of John, chapter 10, specifically verse 34, Yeshua, aka Jesus Christ, as you all will call him in the English, but Yeshua ben Yosef, the Messiah, has this conversation with the Jews, and the Jews were ready to stone him simply because he was advocating and believed that he was the Son of God, as was prophesied in the Old Testament, and also it was foreseen by the prophets of whom God spoke through. And so the Jews, however, didn't necessarily believe that Yeshua was the Son of God, let alone proclaiming he was God himself. But according to the narrative, he would be this. They didn't believe it, however. And as a disclaimer, just to let you know, those Orthodox Jews or Pharisees, it's not that they were anti-messianic. They believed in a Messiah. They had Messiahs before. Messiah comes from the word Mashiach, which means anointed. So they had people before. Moshe was one of them. Moses, right? He led the people out of Egypt through God, accredited, of course, by Yahweh himself, the authority of Yah himself. He was able to lead his people out of Egypt. And God chose him to lead Israel despite his speech impediment, along with Aharon, his brother, or Aaron's help. He helped to lead Israel to the promised land, as was promised to Abraham, that his people, he would be the father of many nations. They would live in a land of milk and honey. The land of Canaan was that. They took it over. That land became theirs. So that being said, Israel is special to Yah's heart. And the bottom line is that through Israel came Yeshua. But the Jews didn't want to necessarily believe that he was the Messiah because they believed that there was a Messiah to come. It just wouldn't be him. So they're not anti-messianic. They just did not believe he specifically was. But one of the things that Yeshua stated, which he used their logic against them, because they proclaimed that basically he wasn't who he proclaimed to be. But he said, is it not written in your law that I have said that you are gods? So if that be the case, that in the law it says that I have said that you are gods, but you yet say that I can't be the Son of God, then how can you condemn me for a proclamation that you all are therefore gods among your people, but I can't be considered the Son of God, of which I'm prophesied to be so? Right? And so the thing is, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes were like Elohim. They were the leaders that were to be respected amongst the Israelite community. These were the people that the Israelites would go to during the synagogue on Shabbat in order to read and understand the law. And so they were highly respected. In fact, during the Babylonian captivity, the Talmud was created by these same Orthodox Jews in order to create this comprehensive legislation that would help to prevent Israel from committing any further infringement of the Torah, which was to their detriment because they became enslaved by the law as a result. This was to help protect God's law surrounding how Israel was to act any and at all times, even if they were outside of captivity. Because being in captivity made it difficult to do the Israelite way, the way that they always have. And so because they didn't have the temple, a lot of things got switched. So something had to be set in place in order to temporarily put them in a protective space spiritually until they can get back and rebuild that temple that their enemies destroyed. That being said, the goal in mind when talking about I've said that you are gods is that you all who are under the adoptionship of the Most High, who receive the word, who are rulers, who are kings, or who are leaders in general of their country or their governance. The goal in mind is that you are to ascertain a certain hierarchy. And the goal of this hierarchy, in a functional sense, is to make sure that you bring things into alignment. I would also like to incorporate into that hierarchy that parents play, in a sense, a godhood role. Because they themselves are what? They are procreators. They mate and then they give life. They have children, such as us, or even those that came before us, who help to keep societies moving, civilizations growing, the earth fruitful of people who will continue to work the earth, who will continue to function in the earth and make sure everything is balanced. Hence why we have these cycles of people being able to come in repetition, and they do the same thing that their forebears did, whether if it's in construction, carpentry, or whatever helps to keep the earth growing and evolutionizing. That being said, in the sense, are we considered gods? Not in the literal sense. We don't manipulate the universe. We don't manipulate the antimatter or the physical matter of the world in a sense that it helps to create create things that are more metaphysical, if that makes any sense. We don't oversee the cycle of death and rebirth, and we certainly don't resurrect people, at least not yet, right? But we're not practicing some weird sort of dark magic or sorcery in order to bring people back to life, if that's even possible. I'm pretty sure there's people out there that believe in that sort of thing, but that's neither here nor there. Point being is, in general, as humans, we don't have these powers. But what we do have the ability to do is to rule over one another, to command or even order our, certain people within our groups to be able to build buildings, build society, make them work in order to yield better conveniences for humanity, for our survival, and things of that nature. That's what we have the capacity to do. But despite having that positioning, God is just a title. In the end, despite the fact that we are that in a functional sense, we still will die like men. Plain and simple. We will die like men. So no matter what power you possess, no matter what riches you have, no matter how great you are, you still are a human being that has the capacity to die, and you will not live forever to keep that position of power. Yes, we are gods, but we will die like men. Even in mythos, gods and goddesses have died. And in the human sense, the same similitude is there. We do die, and that doesn't change. And so the bottom line is, if you are adopted under the sonship of the Most High, then the goal of you is to make sure that you maintain that godhood to the best of your ability. Are we immaculate? Absolutely not. Can we strive for perfection? Absolutely. The goal of perfection isn't to be flawless. The goal of perfection is to maintain a continuity of wholeheartedness in what it is that you believe. Even scripture says a righteous man falls 7 times, he gets up the 8th. The bottom line is we all make mistakes. It doesn't mean that we're horrible because we have that past. But what we can do is, if we know better, we simply do better. If we want to be better, then we become better. We don't just sit around and be idle and not do anything. The goal of a God is to try to maintain that sort of godhood, even despite the fact that you might have a tarnished past. But it doesn't mean that you must turn back to it. it means you must walk away from it and become someone anew. So if you want to, if you are a God in this sense, the goal in mind is to make sure you do the best to maintain that godhood. And that's the understanding of, I have said that you are gods. But okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that video. The audio should be much better now, so I hope you got perspective and understanding from this. I appreciate you all if you got this far in this long form video. Of course, I'll upload some shorts in order so that you all can kind of get some data points from there. You don't have to see the long form. I recommend that you watch the long form, though, if you want to better understand where I'm coming from, right? Best to not sit and be idle and not understand what's the point of the short, and you can just go and look at the long form video to get the full context. So I'll leave it right there, but have a good day or good night wherever you reside. I thank you for listening. If you got this far, comment, like, subscribe to this channel. All right, people. Peace. Take care.